The NHL season is going to be here very, very soon. There's already some big things happening, obviously, as training camps start to gear up a little bit. And also, I will say, one of the other things that I do is Game Over. We are bringing Game Over Calgary back this year. Go subscribe to the Game Over Calgary YouTube channel right now. But we just made an announcement today as some big things are happening. It is Hyperdrive Hockey with Maxime Van Hoot. That is going to be kind of the flagship show of Game Over. So very excited to get that project up and running. So just watch out for that on Game Over. So that is my official plug for all of that. And that is where a lot of my Calgary video content is going to lie this year on the Game Over Calgary YouTube channel. So today, anyway, back to the preview stuff. Today is what I call my accountability episode, where I go back and look at what happened last year, what some of my picks were going into the season, and maybe some of the stuff we can learn from that. So as you can kind of pick up on the theme from the first couple of days, looking at how the Florida Panthers were built, looking at some of the picks from last year, we're just trying to see what are some lessons we can learn before we go into making some of the predictions going into next year. And so for the NFL one, we just ran through every team's over-under prediction. I'm not going to do that for a couple of reasons. One, that gets into a lot of just listing off numbers. And two, I didn't write them down. And so I don't know where they are. Or I did write them down, I just don't know where I put them. So I know where I put these. So we're going to look at a couple of things. I looked at coaches on the hot seat, overvalued teams, and undervalued teams from last year. And so part one was coaches on the hot seat. I went 2 for 2 on this one. The two were the Canadian teams. I said DJ Smith was on the hot seat, and I said Sheldon Keefe was on the hot seat. I went 3 for 4. I don't know why I put one of these wrong. I also got Don Granato right out in Buffalo. The DJ Smith one, that was a long time coming. And Sheldon Keefe, I think that was a long time coming as well. Don Granato, that one didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Even though I did put him on as a coach on the hot seat for this one, I also did understand, like, Buffalo is still a bit of a building team, but I think there's pressure building out in Buffalo. And that was where we kind of picked it up. It's not necessarily, I think this team is good and I think the coach is bad. With Ottawa, there was a bit of that. I don't think DJ Smith was a very good coach. I think Sheldon Keefe is a fine coach. It's just the pressure was mounting and you needed to make a change. And in Toronto, for financial reasons, they can't change the roster. And in Buffalo, it's just been a long time. And so that is where I think some of that came from. The one that I got wrong was Andre Tourigny out in Arizona. I guess the Coyotes were on the hot seat because they moved out to Utah, but Tourigny moves with them. I don't know if I would put him back on there this year because they're in Utah. I think there's a bit more of a honeymoon period going on there, but they did make some big moves this offseason, and they did make a few moves to try to get this team closer to a playoff spot. And so I think there is going to be a little bit more pressure on him this year. In terms of overvalued teams, I got 1 wrong and 4 right. The one I got wrong was the Boston Bruins at 100.5 points. I thought they were overvalued. I thought last year was going to be the year Bergeron retires, Krejci retires. They don't got shit down the middle, and they're going to fall off. And 3 of those 4 things were true. It was just the falling off part that they didn't do, annoyingly. And they're a team that I have to fight it with this year as well, because I hate the contracts that Lindholm and Zadorov get. But I also can't deny that for this year, those are improvements, and it makes this team better. And so long term, I think they're fucked. But for this year, less fucked. So that's going to be something I have to really combat. But Chicago was way overvalued at 72.5. And this is something I've kind of picked up on. One of my strengths is recognizing bad teams. I haven't been great at recognizing the good ones, but one of the things I have long said on this for the last couple of years, I think there is an overvaluation of bad teams. And we saw, like, Chicago's roster last year was dog shit, aside from Connor Bedard. And if one thing happened to that cat, which it did, then that team goes to hell. And then it happened to Taylor Hall. And so a dog shit roster got dog shittier. And this is something, it happens in over-unders for the NFL. It happens here. It happens in the NBA as well. I don't think these odds makers or the people who place money on them really recognize how actually bad these teams really are and the extent of the suckage that they are going to have. I think there's a lot of hedging going on with some of these. And so I think that's where the value in the market comes, is that they really don't want to put a super low number on some of these teams and get caught being all the way done and having the over hit by February, right? Like it's with the White Sox in baseball, like that under hit by about August. So I do think that there is maybe some value to be had in that. But Chicago at 72.5, Ottawa at 91.5. We were saying that one was gonna go under, and we hit that as well. It was got a little dicey there at the end, but that they did hit the under on that one. Pittsburgh at 96.5. I thought that number was, I think part of it is Pittsburgh's a very public team, given Sidney Crosby being there for 20 years and them being in the limelight for so long. They have kind of turned into a real marquee franchise, and one that I think a lot of people are just going to take the over because that's their team. And also, I do think that there was a lot of best case scenario baked into that. You needed best case scenario from Carlson and Letang and Crosby and any goalie they threw out there and Malkin and the depth pieces, and you just didn't get it last year. And Buffalo was kind of the same thing. There was that thought that there was going to be a bit of progression from this Buffalo team, and that just didn't quite hit. And they're going to be an interesting one to analyze as the year kind of goes on. Undervalued teams, I missed on a couple. The ones that we got wrong, Vegas as the fifth best cup odds. I thought that was really undervaluing Vegas. They struggled in the lead up to the trade deadline. They make a couple of big moves, but they get stuck in a wild card spot, and then they lose to Dallas in the first round. And so I would say that was a no. And then Tampa Bay, I had them at plus 2,000 to win the Stanley Cup. I thought that was undervaluing a veteran team. We will not be in on Tampa Bay this year. I'm going to say that one was wrong. But we got right on going over on Detroit, just barely, but we got the over on the Detroit Red Wings. Over on Winnipeg, and this is one where we took advantage a little bit of some narrative things from last year. 91.5 isn't a bad point total to give a team. But I think a lot of people were out on Winnipeg because of they haven't proven it in the playoffs. It's time to make some changes. And they doubled down on that roster, and people thought, well, this is not the long-term direction. And because of the salary cap and some of these things, we get so focused on the long term that you look at the roster, it's like, you know what? For this year, it's pretty good. So why are we undervaluing this team? And it's going to be a bit of a battle to do that again this year, because the last time we saw them, they were giving up 100 goals a game against Colorado. It's still a pretty good roster out there in Winnipeg. And the New York Islanders at 91.5. And annoyingly, they went over. I am so over it with the New York Islanders, but they're constantly going better than expectations and getting those points anyway. So that was a team that we got right. So again, what are some of the lessons that we can take from this? I think it is to not overvalue the concerns you have for a team long term. And it is also, they really overvalue some of these bad teams. And I think that's where we can get a little bit of the slightest bit of an edge on the odds makers this year, is that they don't want to go too low on some of these teams where I don't know if too low exists.